Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Live with CDP podcast, season 3, episode 7 on this Friday, February 18th here in Southern Ontario. And I survived the snowstorm last night and coming home today as well. So anyways, guys, thank you everybody for joining me today on this Live with CDP podcast. I have a busy day ahead of me. I've got a great guest coming on in Barry Davis. And then I'm going to be heading to the Sleeman Center tonight to do camera work for the Guelph Storm Saginaw Spirit game at the Sleeman Center tonight for Rogers TV. So if you guys can just give me one moment, I'm going to bring on my guest today, Barry Davis. He's a former radio personality on the Fan 590 in Toronto, and he was also a reporter, covered the Maple Leafs, and a field reporter for Sportsnet for the Toronto Blue Jays, and he was on, he was their field reporter for when they went to the ALCS 2 years in a row in 15 and 16 as well. And he is now currently a sales consultant for Georgetown Honda as well. And I'm looking for a newer vehicle or a new vehicle this year as well. My car is now almost 11 years old. So I'll get into that another time. But anyways, guys, thanks for everybody for joining me today. And give me 1 second and I'm going to bring on Barry Davis. Hey, Barry, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm actually quite shocked that you mentioned my radio career off the top, because I figured most people forgot because that was so long ago. That was back in the early 90s. So you're showing your age, Chris.
Yes, I am almost 50, though.
Well, I'm above that, so I've got a few on you.
Oh, you don't look it. So it's just amazing how fast time goes over the years, eh?
Yeah, it really does. I mean, even when I look back to those 2 years in 2015 and 2016, some ways it just seems like it was yesterday. And, now we're looking at 5-6 years away since those days of the Toronto Blue Jays.
Well, and I'm a Tigers fan, and it's
I
been
can
now.
see.
Yes, I'm a huge Tigers fan, lifelong Tigers fan, and it's been now a decade since we were in the World Series in 2012, which is hard to believe as well.
I remember that very well. I was at that World Series, and I remember that Detroit Tigers team. And, the hopes were that, they were going to do a nice rebuild and get right back into it. And unfortunately, we may not see any baseball for quite a while. And that's the real sad part, is that this is the time of year where we start looking towards spring training. And by now the teams would be all starting to gather. And, we were starting to look at how teams were looking on paper going into spring training. And at this point, I mean, I've spoken to a few ex-players, and neither one of them feel very confident that we're going to see baseball before the summer.
My gut feeling, Barry, is July. It'll be in July, and it'll be an 81, 82 game schedule at the best.
Which really sucks. I mean, for baseball fans, for what they've had to go through with the rest of society, dealing with COVID, not to mention when you're a fan, you really need sports, many of us, as a kind of escape. And unfortunately, now we've had, a few partial seasons. And if you're a Blue Jays fan, they haven't had a full season where they've actually played their home games at home. So this would have been a great year to start fresh. 162, 81 home games, all the young players they have ready to, hit that next level. It sucks. And I really fear for the game itself, because I'm afraid that if this goes on as long as we think it might, they are going to lose a lot of fans. I remember living through the strike of 94, and many people haven't come back from that yet. And I don't know if it's going to be able to be saved for many people if it goes long.
Yeah, it took me about 2 years to forgive baseball after '94 because, it was just awful what they did with the game. It basically, in my opinion, killed the Montreal Expos
Hmm.
franchise because they
For
had a
sure.
very good chance in '94 of winning the World Series. Maybe they wouldn't have, but I think it would have been a New York Yankee Expo World Series that year as well.
I think it would have been for sure. Instead, we're looking at the Washington Nationals as the former Expos to do it all. But yeah, the fans didn't go away in Montreal. There was bad ownership, and there was the situation with the strike, and the Expos never recovered after that, and that's very unfortunate. So listen, at the end of the day, it's all about money. People always ask, what are they fighting over this time? They're fighting over the same things. And everything I'm reading and seeing, it's just exactly how it's been scripted every other time. They think they're close. They say they're going to get into a meeting. Oh, then the meetings break off. And then it's always going to be that 11th hour. Both sides are going to give up something, but the problem is both sides are digging in right now and they're saying, this is how it's going to be. And there doesn't seem to be any middle ground. But again, that's the way it always is. That's what collective bargaining is all about. Unfortunately, in sports, they don't really collectively bargain, they collectively fight. And this is where we're at right now.
Well, and that leads to my first question, and you've already answered the first part of it. What are your thoughts on the 2022 Toronto Blue Jays if there is a season, and are they a serious World Series contender in your opinion?
Well, based on the young players and where they are in their progression, then I think they definitely are. I mean, like any team, you're always going to need more pitching. And I think the Blue Jays could use some more starting pitching. Yeah, they had a great run last year and they've lost a couple of their top players. The question is, are they replaceable? And I think in the rotation, you do have some young arms that are ready to make the next jump up. And I think that at the end of the day, guys like Robbie Ray and Simeon, they were just stopgaps. They were fillers until the kids were ready. And as much as it hurts for fans to see those two players go, I think they both had career years last year. And I don't see them being able to repeat what they did last season. Maybe they will for one more year, but I don't think it's going to be worth the long-term contracts that they signed, both of them. So at the end of the day, I think the Blue Jays made smart moves by not signing either one of them. I think they definitely need to look at bringing in somebody who's in the prime of the career, spend some money. And listen, I know a lot of fans have said this organization's cheap, but over the last 10 years, I think they've shown that they are willing to spend the money when it's needed. Let's not forget the Troy Tulowitzki contract or the Russell Martin contract. I mean, they doled out large amounts of money, and the same thing, with the more recent free agent signings like Springer. So they are willing to spend the money, and the core is there. It's just a matter of building around that core. And until this thing gets settled, there's not going to be a lot of movement, and there's be no movement. So it's going to be very, very difficult to even predict how good this Jays team is going to be because we have no idea how it's going to look if and when the season starts.
Definitely, and the same thing with the Tigers. Ever since Mike Ilitch passed away, everyone's been on Chris Ilitch saying he's cheap, he doesn't care about winning. But now that the team's more competitive, they built up the farm system. He went out and got Erod from the Red Sox as a starting pitcher. He got Javier Baziez, they from the Mets. So I really think you need to be smart about it and not just spend the money for the sake of it either.
100%. And we've seen that time and time again in sports where, they spend huge amounts of money, and it's not just the money, right, Chris? It's the term of the contract. And when you're giving somebody who's in their late 20s, early 30s, and you're giving them a 7-year contract, going in that by the time you get to years 5, 6, and 7, you're not getting the same player you had when you signed the deal. And the Jays also have a number of young players who they want to avoid going to arbitration with. I think that they need to extend Vladdy. They need to extend Bo. There are a number of players there that they need to not get into any kind of pissing match with when it comes to arbitration. We've seen the bad blood it can cause. We know that these are their franchise players, so they need to take care of their franchise players and build around them instead of trying to bring in, again, like a Marcus Semien or a Robbie Ray, who were great during their time. But these are not the guys that you're building your team around. These are the guys that you're bringing in to support the young players that are there. And now that those young players are ready to make the next move, now you've got to look at what you can do to support them.
Yeah, and with this lockout right now, I feel sorry for the Toronto fans too because 2020 they didn't play any of their games in Toronto, and then
Mhm.
last year they only played maybe a month and a half at the Rogers Center, and now they're looking at another season where possibly they not might not see the team for a long time this year.
It's really sad, Chris. And, I know me personally, through COVID and through lockdowns and through sports not being on, I'm finding other ways to entertain myself. You know, I went and invested in one of those Oculus VR headsets. So when I bored, I'll just sit there and go into this virtual reality world, and I'm not missing sports, and that sucks because I've been such a huge sports fan my whole life. And if somebody like me, who made a living watching sports, who lived, died, breathed sports, is now becoming about it, what's that going to say about all the fringe fans out there? So that's a big battle Major League Baseball is going to have to overcome. And again, I bring up that comparison again to '94 and when it came back and the half empty stadiums and how long it took to rebuild that fan base. And right now, if you look at the Toronto Blue Jays fan base over the last 5 years, it's gotten much younger. It's become very diverse, not only in culture but men versus women. It's unbelievable how diverse the Toronto Blue Jays fan base is and how much younger it is. Well, younger people, and I have a younger person, I have a 21-year-old son, and they want stuff now, right? It's not a matter of, oh, I'll just be patient, I'll wait for baseball to come back, and no, they'll find something else. And that's my biggest concern with what we're seeing right now.
And right now, you got the NHL going on probably to June. I know the Ontario Hockey League now is going to be going until June 20th with the Memorial Cup. Then the CFL starts in May. So there's other sports out there right now where I can follow and pay attention to, and I wouldn't miss Major League Baseball as much now.
Yeah, I think I may have told you this before we started, a few weeks ago when we were talking about this, and I said, listen, I can't talk to you really about what's happening in the NHL
Yeah, yeah,
or any other sports because I found other
yeah,
things to do. I'm
yeah.
watching less and less sports now than I ever have, and this is the worst possible time these two sides could do this. It irritates me to no end, and it's not a matter of saying it's the player's fault, it's the owner's fault. It's both sides' fault,
Yeah.
right? Somebody said, "Oh, the owners didn't have to lock the players out. We could be in the season now." Well, if the players weren't locked out, they would have gone on strike, right? This was not going to start without a new collective bargaining agreement because the old one has expired. So it's not as simple as putting the blame on one side. Both sides are to blame. It's all about the pie, and it's about who gets the bigger share of pie. If they could just split it down the freaking middle,
Yeah.
both sides, you're both rich, you're both going to have more than enough money, let it be. But as I've learned over the years, and I've covered so many labor disputes, they're all exactly the same. They may appear different on the surface, but when you dig deep, whether it's the NHL, NBA, NFL's been pretty good. You don't see a lot of work stoppages there, but Major League Baseball seems to be the worst of the big four
Oh yeah.
when it comes to labor stoppages. And again, they're also the league that doesn't have a hard salary cap. So the owners that are crying poor are making themselves poor. And the players are, give me the money. I'll take as much money as I can possibly get. And this is where we are.
And it's the fans that are the biggest losers out of all
Of
of this.
course.
So definitely. Okay. I just wanted to talk to you about that anyways, because like I said, I was looking forward to a 2022 season, but right now, my opinion, like I said, is going to be at least July, if not longer than that.
I'm afraid you're right, Chris. I
I
wish
hope
I
I'm
could
wrong.
debate you, but I can't.
I hope I'm wrong. So, okay, I'm going to get into some questions I wanted to ask you, Barry, as well, if that's okay.
I
Um,
suppose so, since I'm here.
no problem. Can you just tell my audience just a little bit about yourself and when did you decided you wanted to pursue a career earlier in life in broadcasting and radio and stuff?
All right. You got 40 minutes?
Yeah,
All
I'm
right.
good.
Okay.
I'm good.
So I grew up a huge sports fan and a huge music fan. And I came from a family where both my parents were in show business back in the 50s and 60s. My father was, a lounge singer and actor and performer, and my mother was a dancer. So it was kind of in my blood. And when I was maybe 9 or 10 years old, I'd go around into the playground with a little tape recorder and a little microphone, and I'd literally interview the kids in the playground and just ask stupid questions. So I always knew that there was something inside of me that wanted to entertain. As I became a teenager, I got deeply involved in music, and I was in a number of bands and thought that was going to be my career, but nothing really panned out. And, it's a lot easier said than done to make it in the world of music. And so I was doing that on the side. I was working in a factory full time, and that was going to be my life. And when I was around 22 years old, 21, 22, I got laid off from the factory job and I had no idea what I was going to do. My wife, who was just my girlfriend at the time, suggested going back to school. And so I started looking through a brochure for Humber College, who I'm representing right here now. Uh, and I saw a radio broadcasting course, and I thought, you know what, I want to do this. I really want to do this. This is something I always dreamed of, and I always knew, how do you become someone who's on the radio? How do you become a music DJ or a broadcaster? I had no idea. And I always used to look at the booth where Tom Cheek and Jerry Howarth were when I'd be in the stands. And I looked at my girlfriend at the time and said, one day I'm going to be in that booth. I want to be in that booth one day. So I began my dream by taking this 2-year course at Humber College. And after the first year, near the end of the first year, there was a bulletin board. And on that bulletin board was a sign, and it said, who's looking for a job in radio this summer? And then it had the little tabs with the phone numbers. Anyone who's a little bit older remembers back in the day before we had computers and cell phones and stuff. So instead of grabbing a tab with the phone number, I took the whole sheet off the bulletin board. I went to our the head of our radio department, and I said, how do I get this job? And he said, well, here's a number to call. So I called that number, and it was the Fan, but they weren't the Fan yet. They were still an oldies radio station who carried the Blue Jay games. And I went in, and they said, we're looking for someone to sit behind the control board between midnight and 6, spin the records, and play tapes with the DJ's voice because he's not live overnight. It pays $8 an hour. Do you want it? I said, I'm in. When can you start? I said, right away. So that was how I got my foot in the door. 2 weeks later, they said they were looking for another person. So I called a buddy of mine who I went to school with at Humber, a guy named George Strombolopoulos, who ended up carving himself a nice little career. So I brought George in, and the two of us, when we were going to college, the course started, there was probably about 80 students. By year 2, we were down to 60. Only about 40 finished and graduated. And of the 40, there was maybe about 10 that ended up having careers in the industry. And it wasn't the 10 most talented people. I never thought of myself as one of the most talented people, one of the best voices or anything. But I had a determination in me. I had this, will to want to do it. And George was the same. We looked at each other and said, we're not here to screw around. We're here to get careers. So it worked out. We both started at the bottom and took advantage of my opportunities. And anytime they asked me to do something, whether it's stand on a street corner and interview people on the street about something that's going on, or go cover a high school football game, I'd do it. And I stayed there, and I eventually worked my way up to doing some on-air stuff and built myself, a nice little career there. And I was part of the Toronto Raptors pre and post game show, which was nice. But I kind of capped out there, and it kind of came. My dream was always TV, and I still wasn't sure how I was going to get into TV. Well, after about 10 years at the Fan, a rival radio station started up called The Team, which is now on the same dial that TSN Radio is. Their idea was to do a national sports radio station. And they said they were going to give it a 5-year, run. And they knew there was going to be bumps along the way. And they offered me an offer that literally I could not refuse. I went back to the Fan. I said, listen, I've got an offer from this new station. Can you match it? They said, no, we can't even come close. So I said, okay. And I knew this seems too good to be true. And it was, because 17 months later, the station went under. And I found myself out of work, and I had no idea what I was going to do. And at the time, somebody that I know that was working at the radio station, he had been let go a few months earlier and started working as a producer at Sportsnet, and said, hey, they're looking for a Maple Leafs beat reporter at Sportsnet. put in a demo tape. And thankfully, during my time at the team, they were affiliated with City TV. So we used to do some sports hits on CP24, who was owned by Rogers at the time. So basically, I'd just be standing in front of a camera with no teleprompter, no script, and I'd just be talking sports for 2 minutes once an hour. So that gave me my demo tape. So I gave my demo tape to my friend. He handed it over to the folks at Sportsnet, and they had pretty much already decided someone they were going to hire for the job. And my buddy said, please just have a look at this guy's tape. And about a week later, I got a call from them and they asked me to come in for an interview. And I went in for an interview. And then they called me 2 weeks later for a second interview. And I was fortunate enough to get the job. So I ended up doing the Leafs beat. And that was, man, I tell you what, that was a challenging beat because I'd been doing a lot of Raptors up until then. So I was kind of out of the Maple Leafs loop. And I was brought in to not only do the pre and post game shows, but to break stories. And I had no contacts. I had to rebuild all my contacts and work my way through. That year, I did all 82 games. I think this was the 2001-2002 season. All 81 games, home and away, plus all the playoffs. And this was a team that was a very dysfunctional group. And it had Ed Belfour and Ty Domi and Darcy Tucker and Travis Green and Shane Corson. It was a lot of fun, but it was very stressful. And at the end of the year, guess what? There was the possibility of a lockout or strike the following year. And we knew there wasn't going to be a season. So at that time, the person who was doing our Raptors broadcasts on Sportsnet had left to go somewhere else. They asked me if I wanted to do the Raptors. So I ended up doing that. And at the same time, in the off season, I was doing Blue Jays again because I had done Blue Jays at the Fan from 93 right up to the time I left. So I was very familiar, and baseball was always my first love when it came to sports. So I did the Raptors for a couple of years, and they just, they weren't drawing. They weren't a great team. The first year I covered them, well, that was back in the Fan, but I remember covering them during the year they went 16-66, and it was just awful. And unlike the Leafs, the poorer the Raptors did, the less they actually covered them. They gave him very little attention. So I became pretty much a person without a gig there. And it was right at that time that Rogers really started to invest more in the Blue Jays, and they wanted to really ramp up their coverage. So because of my experience doing Blue Jays in the past, they brought me on to do the pre and post game shows. And so that got me back on with the team. And from probably 2008 right up to 2016, I was at the majority of the games home and away. And so there you go. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, and I've learned about my listening skills because when I first started this, I would ask a guest question, and then I would ask it again, and they already had answered it. So Jerry Howard gave me this advice: great listening skills, because sometimes you can ask your guest one question, and they can give you the answers to 5, 6, 7, or 8 questions that you want to ask later. So that's the one thing I've learned from him and Eric Smith too.
Two incredible human
Yes.
beings. I have learned so much from Jerry over the years. Jerry's given me so many opportunities and so much incredible advice, including exactly what you said there. I know a lot of young broadcasters that the first thing they do when they prepare for an interview is they have their questions written out. Here's question 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And a lot of times you ask question 1 and your guest also answers question 5. And if you're not listening, it sounds very robotic. And if they answer question 5 and then they're leading into something else, you can't go back to question 2 if it has nothing to do with it. Yep. You've always got to be cognizant of what's being said, because the best interviews aren't interviews at all, Chris. They're conversations. Yep. And that's what we're doing right now. We're just having a chat. Yep. I think it's much more interesting for people that are watching and listening when it's something as simple as just, two of us having a conversation as opposed to a scripted interview.
Yeah, I still write stuff down on a piece of paper.
Nothing wrong with that, but go with more topics than specific questions. I want to make sure I address this. Like if I was to sit down with a Blue Jay back in the day and we had a deep conversation, I'd have a list of things I want to make sure that I address. But they weren't questions. They were just topics. So we go there and always, if they're going into this topic, okay, all right, I did want to address this, so let's go into that.
Definitely. And I've gotten that from Tom McCarthy of the Phillies too and stuff. And every guest I have on here, I learned something new from as well.
You can never stop learning. That's the wonderful thing. And, the longer I did this job, the more I learned that you can keep learning from people. and it never ends. And even to this day, you learn new things. I've learned about this system that you're using to do the show on. I never knew existed, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I found this out a year ago from my friend in Philadelphia, and it's great. I can bring on 10 people. You can come on audio if you prefer audio, or I can pre-record a podcast as well. There's a number of things I can do with this, and I'm still learning technology all the time.
As am I.
So I was going to say, did you have any? I know you mentioned Eric Smith and Jerry Howarth, but did you have any other mentors in school or when you're at the fan and at the fan when you were starting out? Mentor that helped you out a little bit as well.
I am really glad you asked that, Chris, because I'd be remiss if I did not mention how important and really vital Tom Cheek was to my career. And I'll tell you an example. When I was at the fan and I started, helping out with the post game show, and I was probably maybe 2 or 3 years into my career. So let's say 95 after the strike. And my job after each game is I'd go down into the clubhouses. I'd stick my microphones into what they call the scrums, where all the reporters are asking questions. And I'd run the tape up and I'd give them this cassette. They'd put it in. And Scott Ferguson was the guy who was hosting Jay's Talk at the time. And he would basically say, let's go down to the clubhouse now. And Barry Davis was talking to so and so, and here's what they had to say. And they'd play little bits. And eventually I started doing one-on-one interviews with some players, and they'd bring them up. Well, one day Tom Cheek said to me, he goes, how come you're not sitting with Scott Ferguson setting up your own interviews? I said, well, they haven't allowed me to sit in that seat and do that. And he goes, well, you know what? I'm going to go talk to somebody. He went and talked to the program director. And the next day, Tom says, you know what? Starting today, you're coming in, you're going to sit next to Scott in the booth, and you're going to set up your own interviews. Tom was absolutely huge for me. He was one of my biggest supporters, and God bless the guy. I mean, I remember when he started to become ill, and he had his brain cancer that he was dealing with, and one of the last TV interviews he did was with me, and it was so great to talk to him, but it was so painful at the same time because he was at the stage in his battle where he would start talking and he would almost forget what he was saying and he'd have to stop. And a few times he would stop in the middle of our conversation and say, listen, you need to ask me that question again because I don't know what I'm saying. And I really apologize. I'm like, you don't have to apologize, Tom. You don't have to apologize. So, that was really tough. And then when he kind of made almost a comeback, he was starting to feel better and he got back in the booth for a few games. And we thought, but we knew that, this is not going to have a happy ending. And sure enough, it didn't. But I'll tell you what, Tom Cheek left a huge legacy. And I wouldn't be the broadcaster I was if it weren't for him.
And I was going to say, growing up in Oakville in the late 70s, I used to listen to Tom and Early Win,
Early
and
win, yeah.
then it became Jerry Howarth, and I
Yeah.
used to tape record the games too because it was a big deal back then. The games weren't on TV as much, and I really loved listening to Tom and Early Win, and then eventually Jerry took over, and I've always been kind of a radio guy, and I he's one guy I wish I was in doing this podcasting years ago because I think Tom would be most likely to come onto a podcast and help somebody that's trying to get in the industry. That's from what I've heard about him.
Oh, absolutely. And it's good to know I'm not the only one who tape recorded baseball games.
Yeah, on a cassette. On a
Yep.
cassette. Yep. Back in the
I
late
even used
70s.
to take pictures of my TV with an old camera, it was the old snap camera.
Yeah, yeah.
And somewhere I've got pictures of Blue Jay games. I know I've already found ones I've had of Maple Leaf games where, I've taken a picture of the TV and you got this big dot in the middle because back then the resolution, you could not take a proper picture of your TV screen.
Definitely. And I was lucky as a kid too, because being a Tigers fan, I got to listen to Ernie Harwell and Paul
Of
Carey
course.
on WJR in Detroit. And then I had Tom and Jerry and Early Win with the Blue Jays. So as a kid growing up in the 70s and early 80s, I had the best of both worlds with those broadcasts.
That was one of the nice things about living in Southern Ontario is you had access to the Detroit stations, and depending on where you were, you could possibly pick up the Cleveland stations. There were
Yes.
times I remember being in my bedroom at night with my little AM radio trying to find baseball games, and quite often I'd hear a Tigers game or a Cleveland Indians game, and every once in a while when the fan radio started in New York,
New York
I was
in
able to get
88.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's a real shame that radio has gone the route it has gone. And it's funny that from the research I've done, people are just as interested in audio podcasts as they are video podcasts, but nobody listens to the radio anymore. And it's a shame. And it really was a shame when Sportsnet decided to simulcast the TV broadcasts. And we know how badly that worked. And I was so glad when, when Ben got back into the broadcast
Yes.
booth, because as you know, Chris, and you're a big radio baseball fan. There's no sport that translates to radio as well as baseball does. It's such a theater of the mind. When I was working at the Fan, we used to have a number of people that called in regularly that were hearing are visually impaired or completely blind, and they loved how Tom and Jerry could paint that picture in their head and give them an idea. They could actually see in their minds what was happening on the field, even though they could not physically see the game. And that says a lot. And listen, there's some great play-by-play people for radio in hockey and baseball, or in basketball as well, but it's just not the same. Those sports move at such a speed, you really need to see it to capture what's happening. Baseball, there's so much time, and Tom and Jerry were just the best. They so different in their styles, but they were both so good at painting that picture.
And I was reading Jerry's book. Originally, he applied for the Jays job in '76, and
Yeah,
he didn't get it. And then he obviously he got it in '80, '81, but he almost ended up with the Oakland A's.
that's
And
right.
The Oakland A's reneged. The owner reneged on him, and I guess Jerry in the book was saying how devastated he was, and but he never gave up. And then eventually he got the Jays job. I think towards the end of '81, beginning of '82.
Yeah. If you're a fan of Jerry Howarth or a fan of broadcasting, I highly recommend his book. It is a tremendous book. Great stories from Jerry.
Yes, and I was shocked when he said he was going to come on my podcast this year, and I'm like, wow, this guy's a legend, and I'm kind of a 49, 50-year-old guy trying to break into the radio industry at my age, and he was so supportive and gave me a lot of great advice, and he's always encouraging me with messages on Facebook as well.
One of the first games I ever went down, uh, when I was at the Fan, and I was on the field for batting practice, and it was one of my first assignments. And I was supposed to do an interview with somebody from the other team. And the Jays were playing the Milwaukee Brewers at the time. I remember it well. And I said to Jerry, I'm not sure who would interview. And he said, well, come over here, Barry. I'll introduce you to a couple of people. So right away, he brings me to one of their relievers, a guy named Graham Lloyd, big, tall Australian guy. And he goes, well, Barry, this is Graham. Graham, this is Barry. Would you like to talk to him? And he set up that interview. And then as soon as that one is done, let's see if I can get you to guess who it was. A Milwaukee Brewers broadcaster who was also very famous for his roles in movies.
Bob Uecker, Mr.
Bob Uecker.
Baseball.
And I still have that interview on a
Wow.
reel-to-reel tape that I did with Bob Uecker in 1993. And that was all courtesy of Jerry Howarth. He set
Wow.
those up for me. And
Wow.
between those two guys, man, I tell you what, it's a rarity, unfortunately, in this industry, where a lot of people will get to the point where they're so big that they start to just believe, their poop don't stink anymore. And, it's all about them. Tom and Jerry never developed those types of egos. They were always there for me. They were always so helpful. Brian Williams is another one that I had a chance to meet over my career in radio and TV, and always had time to sit and say, hey, here's what you can do to make yourself better. And I try anytime I get asked by a young broadcaster, I always want to take the time because I want to give back what I was given. I'm nowhere near the level of Tom and Jerry, but I do have many years of experience in the industry. So if somebody is breaking in, I want to do whatever I can to give back too.
And I've been lucky too. A lot of my podcasts, these guys have come on. They've been really great with me, and some have even given me more time than they wanted to. And I've been very lucky. And the thing is, I'm hoping with doing this podcast and volunteering with Rogers TV as a camera operator, I'm seeing on both sides of it. Hopefully, one day I will get an opportunity in radio. And this is something I have a passion for, and I just hopefully I get that opportunity at one point.
Well, I'll tell you, Chris, the fact that other areas of the industry really help as well. Being a camera operator, I made sure that I learned how to edit very early on, both edit audio and video. And all these years later, when I started up my own podcast, who knew that was going to be such a vital thing to know how to edit? So now I do that. I use that skill with my music as well, editing audio and video and being able to record and stuff like that. These are things that, had I not learned those skills early on, I wouldn't be able to do a lot of the things I do today, because it's hard when you're at my age and you try to learn new things.
That's true, and I was scared when I went with Rogers TV doing the OHL games for the Guelph Storm. I had never done camera work before,
Oh
and
no.
the producer had faith in me, and he threw me in, and I stuck it out, and I hung in there, and now I love it, and I love going to the games all the time. It's not work; it's something I have a passion for, and I'm hoping to continue to learn through Rogers TV as well as my podcast from my guests.
That's awesome. No, I'm really happy to hear that. It's good to see somebody with passion, and be able to follow your passion. And I've been out of the industry now for 5 or 6 years, and I spent a few years really starting to question, my decisions and question where I was. But now I look back and I'm really happy with where I am in my life right now. Other than the fact that there is a shortage of cars right now, and it's almost
Yes,
impossible to buy a new car. And I heard you mention buying a
yes.
car. Well, if you got to buy a new car, give yourself at least 6 to 8 weeks, because that's how long it takes to get a new car these days. And but I really enjoy doing what I'm doing, and it gave me a chance to, when I stepped away from the media industry after all those years, uh, to spend more time with my family. I spent 20 some odd years seeing my family only for half a year. My son went from a baby to 21 years old, and I barely knew him because we didn't spend any time together. So, and I was able to get back into music. I literally retired from music in 1993 and did not do any live performances for 25 years before I got back up on a stage. To me, music is such a passion for me. So I love the fact that I'm able to strap on my guitar and sing for people now, because that's something I always wanted to do as well. And I got to live for over 20 years doing my dream job, and very few people get a chance to do their dream job. I am so blessed and honored to have had that opportunity to do that. I have no regrets on anything, and I'm just really glad I have those experiences. And that's why, when you asked me to come on your show, I'm more than happy to. It's always nice to be able to sit and talk about sports and talk about anything with anybody in this type of format. So thanks for the invite, Chris.
No problem. Do you have like 2 more minutes? Do you
Sure,
have
I've
two
got
more
two
minutes?
more minutes.
2 more. Okay. Does your band ever come to the Guelph, Kitchener, Waterloo area, or do you just stay in the Greater Toronto
No,
area?
we've actually played Kitchener and Waterloo. We're actually one of my bands, my Cars tribute. We're playing in Cambridge on March the 4th, which isn't too far from that area, actually. I'll
I
put
live
in a
in
plug.
Guelph, 10 minutes away.
There you go. I'm going to put in a plug. It's called Rhythm and Brews. It's in Cambridge. We're playing with a police tribute band. They're
Oh,
playing the
great!
first set, and we're doing the second set. We're calling it the Police Cars Show.
Wow. What
So
time? What time is it at?
it starts at 9, and I think it goes till midnight. So get some people and come out and see us. Be nice to meet you in person.
Yeah, that would be great. I'll have to get the information for you. What day is that? March 4th again?
It's a
Is it
Friday.
Friday? Oh, okay. Um,
You have
I
hockey Friday nights, don't you?
Yeah, but I maybe I'll see if I can weasel out of this one and come see your band, because it'd be nice to see live
Yeah.
music again. It's been a while.
Oh, I tell you, and once the summer hit, and we just found out that as of now, the summer festival series is back on. So my petty band, we've got a booking. This is out in the East End in East York at an outdoor festival at the end of March. So we're actually going to be playing outdoors March 26th or 27th. So I'm hoping that the groundhog has ended winter by then and it's nice and mild. But we'll be all over the place playing festivals all summer long with probably all three of my acts. My petty band, We Ain't Petty, Driven, my tribute to the Cars, and then the new act that I put together during COVID, which is a Beatles duo tribute, where myself and my podcast co-host Tom Forth, we play Beatles songs, just the two of us. We've got some backing tracks that we use on some, but it's just a fun night. When people come to see us, we have a whole video production going on behind us as well. So It's a lot of fun. So now that it seems that they're finally going to be, easing some of these restrictions, we can get back to making live music again.
And I put your website on here too for my audience as well.
Oh, my website hasn't been updated in about 5 years, so I don't know if there's
Okay.
anything on my website anymore. But if you want to go to either my Facebook or Twitter pages, I've got Facebook pages for all three of my bands, and Twitter. I think I've got a petty one, but you can follow me, and I see you keep scrolling it down the bottom there, which is great. So anything that's going on with the bands, I usually post on my Twitter pages.
Okay, and one last question I wanted to ask you. What was your most memorable interview story you did? Most memorable interview you did with the Blue Jays, and who was
Oh,
who was the best Blue Jays player to interview in your time as a on-field reporter?
all right. I've got to split this up in different categories. Okay. First of all, the kindest, most genuine human being I ever had a chance to have a conversation with on camera was Devin Travis. No doubt about it. Former Detroit Tiger draft pick.
Mm-hmm.
And just tremendous human being. The most insightful, intellectual interview I ever had was probably with Chris Colabello. But the most fun I ever had, and everyone knows this, was Munenori Kawasaki. Man, Munenori Kawasaki actually made me go viral in Japan. There was like millions of views of these interviews I did with Munenori Kawasaki. Him and Joe Biagini. The only thing I wish I could have done is had Kawasaki on one side and Biagini on the other, and just have the two of them go at it. But they weren't teammates. It's unfortunate. But as soon as Kawasaki left, Biagini comes in, so there was always that entertainment aspect of it, and they were both so much fun to chat with.
Wow. And when you did the games too, did you have a favorite American League ballpark and a National League ballpark?
Oh, okay. National League, I'll tell you right away because that's the easy one. San Diego is by far my favorite ballpark, Petco Field and Petco Park, I think it is. And of course, uh, San Francisco is gorgeous as well. For the American League, see, that's tough because, uh, people always think Fenway's a wonderful ballpark and it's got great history, but it's a complete dump. The sight lines are terrible. The camera bay is cramped. The press box is horrific. Uh, it's always Wrigley, by the way, and I grew up a Cubs fan. So, but American League ballparks, just as far as amenities and everything like that, I'm probably going to say Baltimore. I still think that Camden Yards is still one of the most beautiful ballparks I've been to. The thing is, everybody's making before Camden Yards came around, everyone was doing the big stadiums like Rogers Center, right? And now
Yep.
everybody's started once Camden Yards came, everybody started doing replicas of that. So many ballparks look the same, but the backdrops are different, which makes it beautiful. I got to mention Pittsburgh too, because it's just a
Oh,
gorgeous backdrop.
absolutely, absolutely.
There are so many ballparks. It's easier to tell you the ones that I don't like, and that's Oakland, probably where the White Sox play. I don't even know what they call that these days because they keep changing.
Guaranteed rate field.
There you go. It changes every couple of years.
Yeah,
And of course the Trop.
that's
It's
a
a great
dump.
view from the press box, but
Yeah,
just a dump of a stadium.
dump.
So most of the other ones are really, really nice.
I actually miss the old stadiums like Tiger Stadium, Exhibition Stadium. I actually was fond of
Well,
Veteran Stadium in Philly. I was fond of.
I tell you what, people that are too young to have gone to games at Exhibition Stadium cannot relate to those of us who did. And yes, the bench seats on the first baseline didn't have
Oh,
backs and they could get cold and they can get
get hot.
slimy, right? Yes, that breeze coming off Lake Ontario was brutal.
Yeah,
Yes, if you got seats in the bleachers, you could be
yeah,
so far away from center field that you're in a different time zone. But there
yeah.
was something magical about Exhibition Stadium, about going to Dominion and buying the $2 Junior Jays tickets,
Tickets.
getting there early for batting practice and finding the best seat available, seeing the rides going on during the CNE. I miss Exhibition
Yeah,
Stadium. I really
I,
miss it. I probably wouldn't say that if I actually had covered games working there,
yeah.
but from a fan standpoint, really cool.
Yeah, because my first ever game there was in '78 with my late dad, so I have memories of my dad taking me there,
Same with me.
and I grew up I grew up, like I said, a Tigers fan, but also I like the Jays, and it just so many good memories there as well.
Yeah.
But I do like the new BMO field. I'm gonna let you go, Barry. I'm just gonna one last thing, and that's basically advice. Any advice for those, not just myself, looking to pursue a career in radio, TV, or even start their own business? And where can my audience find you on social media and your band again?
Okay, so advice wise, be patient. Don't do this if you think that this is a way to get rich, because while podcasting is increasing, there definitely is the possibility of earning money. There are so many people doing it right now, and even me. I haven't done a podcast in several months. I just wasn't getting enough views and listens to really get any advertisers to want to get in on it. So do it for you. Do it to get the experience. Do it because you enjoy doing it. Don't put pressure on yourself to get views and listens and make money off it, because that's just going to frustrate you. As far as the mainstream media, well, it's a complete mess right now, and it's very hard to get in the door right now, especially if you're our age, right? Nobody's interested in hiring 50-year-old people to start in TV anymore. So uh, do it because you love to do it. That's the only advice I can get. And whether you're using top of the line equipment or using the equipment you can afford, do it for you and keep it interesting and try to come up with something that no one else is doing, which again is a huge challenge because so many people are doing podcasts. So if you can kind of find a way of coming at it at a different angle to give somebody something different, just this whole setup is really cool. I've never seen anything like it before, so I really like that.
Sorry, go ahead.
So yeah, and as far as the social media, Twitter at Barry Davis _. I'm on there less than I used to be because it's become a very toxic, judgmental place, and there's a lot of hate being spewed on social media on Twitter. But I still pop on there once in a while. When I post, I'm usually posting something positive. That's what I'm trying to do. Trying to be empathetic in a judgmental world right now is not an easy thing to do. So you can follow me there. I'm also on Facebook as well, and you can look up the bands We Ain't Petty, Driven, and Nowhere Men are the three bands.
Okay, definitely. And when I have each guest on, I try to put on a background for that guest. Like if somebody's on from Philadelphia, I put on something from Philadelphia. But also one thing, Barry, too, 80% of my podcast is sports, but now I'm branching out into comedians, actors, people
Awesome.
from the news industry, trying to branch out a little more as well. Try to be more, be able to try to interview other people from other professions as well.
And here's one last advice for you. And I always said this to whoever co-hosted with me. Don't ever think of what you're doing as an interview. Think of it as a conversation or a chat,
Station. Okay.
right? That's the
Conversation.
best advice I can give, because that's a lot more compelling, a lot more interesting for your listener or viewer than an interview.
Hopefully Eric Smith watches this because Eric Smith has also been a really good mentor for me online as well with what I'm trying to do.
Well, Eric and I kind of came up in it together, and he's actually one of the reasons why I stopped doing the Raptors, because I was doing the Raptors pre and post game show, and he came in as a rookie, and right away I knew he's got something, and he knows way more about basketball than I do. And as he became more established, I kind of stepped away more from the basketball, and I'm so thrilled to know what he's doing right now, and he's just a really good person too.
Okay. I was going to say again, Barry, I kept you a little bit longer than I was supposed to, but I want to say thank you so much for coming on today. And it was great talking to you, Barry. And hopefully I can keep in touch with you on social media and check out your band hopefully soon.
Anytime, Chris. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much, Barry. Have a great day and weekend.
You too.
Okay. Take care. Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed my podcast today with Barry Davis. And you can also check him out on Twitter at Barry Davis _ or his band, We Ain't Pretty Band on Twitter as well. And I really appreciate his time coming on today. I just want to say thank you to everybody watching this live on my YouTube channel. Please subscribe if you haven't. Thank you to everyone watching this on Facebook Live and Twitter. And also, guys, just going to put this on here as well. And we'll just put this right here. Live with CDP podcast will be downloaded onto Google Podcasts, Anchor FM, Apple Podcasts, Breaker, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, Spotify, Castbox, and LinkedIn as well. And you guys can also check me out on TikTok at Live with CDP there as well. And before we go, I'm just going to let you guys know who my next guest is. My next Live with CDP podcast is going to be this Tuesday, February 22nd at 3 o'clock. My guest is going to be Jack Michaels, the TV radio play-by-play announcer for the NHL's Edmonton Oilers on CHED 630 in Edmonton and on Sportsnet as well. So 3 o'clock Eastern on Tuesday, February 22nd as well. And before I go, guys, I'm just going to show you a little clip of Barry's work when he was with Sportsnet and covering the Toronto Blue Jays.
And I'm here at Barry Davis from Sportsnet. How you doing?
Tremendous.
You look amazing.
I am joined by Munenori Kawasaki. And Kawa, what are you feeling right now? I know you talked about a bush party, but right now we're having a champagne party.
Yeah, I'm a drunk.
There's been a lot of speculation and talk over the last few days as to exactly what happened when a ball errantly left your hand and hit me in the leg. For many veterans, it's a case of make the team or seek out.
Joe, I think you may have those on backwards, but they look good on you.
Are they? Are they backwards?
Are you going to open up the champagne bottles?
No, I'm using it as a microphone. I'm going around interviewing people.
Dunedin typically is a little bit cooler in February. How's the weather been for the players early on in spring training?
You see, I'm wearing a coat here this morning. And again, yesterday the nose was running. It's chilly. It's about 7 degrees Celsius right now. It will warm up as the day goes on. But yeah, the players have been talking about it too the last couple of days.
You go down, and that's those things.
I can feel that.
You
right
feel
now,
it right. And
already after 15 or 20 that we just did.
yeah, it was 3, Barry. But
Close. It's one thing to be physically ready to pitch in the majors. It's another thing to be mentally ready. And that's what a lot of people have said when seeing you pitch is that it's one thing to have the stuff, but you've got the mind. Is that something that you've always seemed to have had growing up?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I played up. I played with guys 2 or 3 or 4 years older than me. So
what's it like as a pitcher when you go out there and you feel good going to the mound, but then once the game starts, you walk 1 or 2 guys, and all of a sudden it starts to get into your head maybe that I just can't get guys out. Are you at the point now in your life where you have to just take what any of the doubters say, whatever any fans that have turned against you say, and say, look, I'm sorry, but right now I just want to hear the positive things. Mentally, baseball hasn't always been an easy ride for Rasmus. His issues with Tony La Russa and the Cardinals are very well documented. But what many people don't realize is that many of the demons he dealt with in St. Louis carried over to his first couple of years with the Blue Jays. Being a father, however, gave him some new perspective, and in some ways, his young daughter may have saved his career.
But here's the thing. You could take the dumbest thing we ever did. Does not compare to what these people have done.
Somebody traded a drivable 2000 Volkswagen Golf for a packet of McDonald's Szechuan sauce.
You understand that whoever made this sauce has the recipe for this sauce.
Yes.
Can make lots and lots and lots. They could very easily produce millions of packets of this stuff, put it out tomorrow, and then all of a sudden each one of those packets that were purchased before for big bucks are worth literally nothing unless they have the code on them saying these were the original. This is ridiculous. I grew up in a home where my father traveled more than I did when I was a reporter.
Really?
And he also was an alcoholic. So my mother pretty much was living the life of a single mom who had to work a lot of hours.
Yeah.
And I was always known as a hyper kid, a worrying kid, one of those types of things. And it wasn't until my adult life that all this started to come to the forefront.
Yeah.
Anyways, guys, that clip was courtesy of Barry Davis's YouTube channel as well. Again, I want to say thank you so much to Barry Davis for coming on and talking about his career with the Fan 590 in Toronto, and also with Sportsnet as well. And now he's a sales consultant with Georgetown Honda as well. So one of my favorite guests, and I hope to have him back on my podcast in the future as well. And you can also check out his Facebook page, NS Media Canada.com. You can check that out as well. And also, guys, just to let you know, The National Basketball League of Canada, Canada's oldest basketball league, returns after a 2-year absence with 2 games on Family Day, February 21st, Monday, February 21st. The London Lightning take on the Kitchener Titans at 2 p.m. and the Windsor Express take on the Sudbury 5 at 2 o'clock. So it's nice to see Canada's oldest pro basketball league, their 10th year, back after a 2-year absence. And I'm looking forward to being a part of the NBL of Canada, as hopefully is a media affiliate as well. I've been in touch with them, and it looks like it's going to happen. So hopefully you guys can follow the league as well. You can check the league out at www.nblcanada.ca or just basically Google nblcanada.ca, and all the latest of all the teams there and all their players and stuff, and information about the league will be on that website as well. So yeah, like I said, they got 2 games this Monday: London at Kitchener Waterloo Titans and Windsor Express at the Sudbury Fives. And I'm going to hopefully bring on one of my guests from the NBL Canada who's involved with the Windsor Express, Aaron Sanders, in beginning of March, and we'll talk about the league starting up and how it's been for him to come back doing the Windsor Express games as their play-by-play announcer on their audio games or live online streaming games as well. And also, guys, before I wrap it up, I just wanted to let you know the next Guelph Storm game is Friday night tonight against the Saginaw Spirit, 7:30 face-off at the Sleeman Center. If you can't go down to the game tonight, it's 50% capacity. You can tune in to Rogers TV in Guelph, which I'll be doing camera work for, or you can also listen to the game on radio on CJOY 1460 with Larry Malott, who's the longtime Guelph Storm announcer. He does a great job as well. So anyways, guys, this was my 4th podcast this week. I just want to say thank you to all my guests that came on this week, and of course Barry Davis as well. So I hope everybody has a great weekend, and I look forward to my next Live with CDP podcast this Tuesday, February 22nd, again at 3 o'clock Eastern. Jack Michaels, the TV radio play-by-play announcer for the Edmonton Oilers, will come on and talk about his career and the latest with the Edmonton Oilers, who are now playing very good hockey under Jay Woodcroft, who took over for Dave Tippett, who was fired recently as well. So anyways, I think that's pretty well it. But again, I want to say thank you to everybody that was watching my podcast live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and again on my audio platforms. And that's about it. I really hope everyone has a great weekend, and I'm looking forward to doing some camera work tonight with Rogers TV for the Guelph Storm Saginaw Spirit game. So, all right. Again, thanks to Barry Davis for coming on. Hope you all enjoyed my podcast. Please, if you have any feedback, leave me messages on my Twitter page, Facebook page, or you guys can email me at cpalme19@gmail.com. That's cpalme19@gmail.com with any kind of feedback as well. So, all right, guys. Again, thanks for watching Live with CDP podcast or listening, and we'll see you guys this Tuesday at 3 with Jack Michaels.